My name's Julie. Life threw me a curveball when I was just 9. Dad had been sick for a while, but I didn't really get what was happening until he was gone for good. One day he was there, the next day just an empty space at the dinner table. Mom didn't take long to fill that space. Within a few months, she brought home Frank. I guess loneliness hits hard and fast. Frank moved in like he owned the place, and it was clear he wasn't keen on having me around. Julie, this is Frank. Frank, this is my daughter, Julie. Mom introduced us the day he moved in. His look was cold, like he'd rather be anywhere else, but here looking at me. Hi, I managed, a bit shy, but trying to be polite. Frank just nodded, didn't even smile. He turned to Mom. Sarah, can we talk about the living arrangements? I remember feeling a chill as they walked away, his hand on her shoulder. It wasn't long before I started feeling like an outsider. Frank had rules for everything, and he was always on my case. Don't leave your stuff in the living room, eat faster, or too much noise. It was relentless. Mom did nothing. She just nodded along with whatever Frank said, her eyes empty, or maybe just tired. One evening, things boiled over at dinner. I had accidentally knocked over a glass of water, and it spilled towards Frank. Clumsy kid, can't you do anything right? Frank snapped, jumping up as the water splashed his pants. Sorry, Frank. It was just an accident, I stammered, feeling my face heat up. Sorry doesn't clean up messes, Julie. Be more careful, he scolded, his voice raised more than necessary. Mom just sat there, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, silent. I looked at her, hoping she'd say something, anything in my defense. But nothing came. After dinner, I heard them arguing in their room. Frank's voice was loud and harsh. Sarah, that kid of yours needs to shape up. I'm not gonna live in chaos just because you're used to it. Mom's reply was soft, but I caught bits of it. Frank, please. She's just a child. She's still adjusting. Adjusting? It's been months. I'm telling you, if things don't change. I didn't hear the rest, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. Frank wanted me out of the way, and Mom wasn't fighting too hard against the idea. The next few months were just as tough. Frank's complaints were a daily soundtrack, and Mom's silence grew heavier. I was walking on eggshells, trying not to make a sound, disappear if I could. But you can't disappear in your own home, can you? Even a 9-year-old knows that much. Life at home got trickier when Mom told us she was expecting. Frank already had his hands full just tolerating me, and the news didn't exactly make him jump for joy. He was silent for a long minute before he spoke, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. Well, that's just great, Sarah. Just what we needed, he said, his tone dripping with something that sounded a lot like sarcasm. Mom just smiled, a bit too weakly. It's a blessing, Frank. You'll see. A fresh start for us. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and dread. A little brother or sister seemed like a dream, someone new to connect with, but with Frank's mood swings, I wasn't so sure. Months flew by, and the baby finally arrived. It was a girl, and they named her Anna. I was thrilled. She was tiny, and when I first saw her, all wrapped up in her pink blanket, my heart melted. I thought having Anna around might make things better, even make Frank soften up a bit. Holding Anna felt magical. She was so small, her tiny fingers grasping at nothing. Hey there, Anna. I'm your big sister, Julie. I'm gonna take good care of you, I whispered, promising silently to be there for her, no matter what. But the magic didn't last. Bringing Anna home changed the dynamics again. Frank was fussier than ever, especially about money. One night, about a week after Anna came home, I overheard him talking to Mom in the kitchen. His voice was harsh, louder than it needed to be. More expenses, Sarah. Diapers, formula, God knows what else. And what about Julie? She's not even mine, and I'm footing the bill for her too? Mom's voice was a quiet murmur. Frank, please, she's just a child. We can manage. Things will settle down. It's not just about managing, Sarah. It's about priorities. We need to think about our family now. Our real family. I knew what that meant. I wasn't real family. The sting of those words hit me hard. I slid down the wall, by my door, hugging my knees, trying not to cry. The final straw came when Frank sat us down in the living room one evening, his face serious, his eyes avoiding mine. Sarah, we need to think about the future. Julie's getting older, and expenses are piling up. Maybe it's time she went to live with her Aunt Claire. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Sent away? Just like that? Mom finally spoke, looking at me, her eyes sad. Julie, honey, it might not be so bad. Aunt Claire has a nice house, and you'll be well taken care of. But Mom, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you and Anna. The room went silent. Frank's next words were cold and final. It's decided then. I'll call Claire in the morning. Moving in with Aunt Claire was like stepping into a different world. Her house was big, clean, and always silent. Too silent for comfort. The first day I arrived, she laid down her laws like we were setting terms for a peace treaty after a long war. You'll follow my rules under my roof, Julie. No nonsense, no mess, no backtalk, she declared as she led me through the hall to what would be my room. The room was plain, with bare walls and a single bed against the corner. It felt nothing like home. I nodded, too tired and too upset to argue. Homework right after school, chores before dinner, and lights out by 9. I won't tolerate any laziness or sloppiness, you hear? Aunt Claire continued, her voice firm. Yes, Aunt Claire, I responded, my voice a whisper. Speak up when you're spoken to. Let's have no mumbling here, she snapped. I quickly corrected my tone. Yes, Aunt Claire, I understand. The days that followed blended into each other, each as strict and unforgiving as the last. Aunt Claire was tough, tougher than anyone I'd ever known. She had a way of making simple conversations feel like interrogations. Homework was a battlefield too. If I got a B instead of an A, Aunt Claire had words that stung sharper than any I'd heard before. You can do better than this. Your laziness won't fly here, she'd scold, even though I'd spent hours poring over books. The worst was how she reminded me of my mom's decision to send me away. If I dared to talk back or ask for less criticism, she'd retort sharply, no wonder your mom sent you here. You need discipline you obviously weren't getting. Those words hurt. They always did. They made me feel unwanted, unloved, like I was just another problem Mom had to solve by shipping me off. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I learned to keep my head down, do as told, and speak only when necessary. Aunt Claire had no patience for tears or complaints, and I had no energy left to fight. It's for your own good, she'd often say after a particularly harsh scolding, as if the sting of her words was supposed to mold me into someone better. I wasn't sure who that better person was supposed to be. All I knew was I was getting really good at being alone, at being quiet, at not being a problem. Because in Aunt Claire's house, not being a problem was the best thing you could be. Living with Aunt Claire was suffocating, and I found myself missing my mom more each day, even though I knew she had let me go without much of a fight. One afternoon, the longing got too much. Aunt Claire was out, probably at her bridge club, and I knew I had a couple of hours at least. Her phone was always left on the kitchen counter, charging next to the fruit bowl. It seemed like my only link back to my old life. I hesitated for a minute before I picked it up. Dialing my mom's number was muscle memory. I hadn't forgotten it, maybe I never would. My heart was racing as I heard the phone ring. Once, twice, then her voice. Hello? Mom? It's me, Julie. There was a pause, a breath maybe, then, Julie, why are you calling? I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I just wanted to hear your voice. Another pause, longer this time. Then cold, hard, you shouldn't have called. But Mom. Julie, listen to me. You need to stop this. I can't have you calling me. But why? I miss you, Mom. I miss home. When can I come back? Her voice was flat, emotionless as if she was discussing the weather. You can't. That's done. Don't call here anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, please. Just don't, Julie. There's nothing here for you. Goodbye. She hung up, and the line went dead. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I felt my hands shake as I put the phone back on the charger. The finality in her voice broke something in me. She didn't want me. She really didn't want me anymore. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled to my room. I closed the door softly, not wanting to make any noise that might hint at my rebellion. I sat on the floor, my back against my bed, and let myself cry. The room felt smaller than ever, a box that was slowly closing in on me. About an hour later, I heard the front door open and close. Aunt Claire's voice called out, "Julie? You better have finished your chores." "Yes, Aunt Claire," I called back, wiping my eyes quickly with the back of my hand. I didn't want her to see any signs of weakness. Weakness was not tolerated here. I went to the kitchen to help with dinner as if nothing had happened, but inside, I was different. I felt emptier, more alone. Mom's voice, those final words, played over and over in my head. That night, Aunt Claire discovered the call log on her phone. Her face twisted into a scowl as she stormed into my room, her voice a harsh whisper that cut through the quiet. "So, you took my phone to call your mother? Thought you'd go behind my back?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. I just wanted to hear her voice. Aunt Claire laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And what did that get you, huh? She doesn't want you, Julie. Even you can't deny it now." Her words were like ice, and I felt them chill me to the bone. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and painful. "No more phone. No more pity parties. You're here because she doesn't want you. Remember that." The punishment was severe. More chores, stricter rules, and the cold shoulder from Aunt Claire, who made sure every day thereafter that I felt just how unwanted I was. Aunt Claire's house had become a prison, each day dragging, heavier than the last. It was clear I was nothing but a burden to her, a nuisance she tolerated only because she had to. But even that thin thread of obligation snapped one chilly morning a year into my stay. "You're packing your bags today, Julie," Aunt Claire announced over breakfast, her voice stern and final. I stared at her, spoon halfway to my mouth. "What? Why?" "Your mother stopped sending money." "No money, no reason to keep you here," she replied bluntly, sipping her coffee as if we were discussing something as trivial as the weather. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "So, what happens to me now?" She shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture. "Not my problem. You can go live with your grandmother. If she won't take you, then it's the orphanage." The thought of going to an orphanage terrified me, but the mention of Grandma sparked a tiny flicker of hope. I hadn't seen her since I was little, barely remembered her, but surely she wouldn't turn me away. Packing my bags felt surreal, like I was stripping away layers of my life at Aunt Claire's, each item a reminder of the year I'd lost. Aunt Claire drove me to Grandma's, the car ride silent except for the hum of the engine. We arrived at a modest house, smaller and cozier than Aunt Claire's imposing place. Grandma was waiting at the door, her expression unreadable. "This is Julie, your granddaughter," Aunt Claire said, not bothering with niceties. "I can't keep her anymore. Sarah stopped paying." Grandma looked me over, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I see. Come in, Julie." Aunt Claire didn't linger. With a brief nod, she left, her duty discarded as easily as she'd disposed of me. Inside, Grandma's house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking. It felt welcoming, a stark contrast to Aunt Claire's sterile environment. "You'll be staying in the guest room. I suppose we'll need to sort out some more permanent arrangements," Grandma said, leading me down the hall. The guest room was small, with a window overlooking the garden. It felt safe, a word I hadn't associated with a place in a long time. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice low, still unsure of my welcome. She nodded. "We're family, Julie. You belong here more than anywhere else." Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to life with Grandma. It was different. She was strict, but there was a kindness to her rules, a gentleness in her reprimands. "You need to do your chores, Julie. Everyone contributes here," she would remind me, but her tone was patient, not harsh. "Yes, Grandma," I would respond, grateful for her fair approach. Living with Grandma, I began to heal. I found solace in the quiet routine of our days, the peaceful nights, and the steady rhythm of life that was so different from the chaos with Aunt Claire. The months rolled by, and on my 16th birthday, Grandma made a decision that would seal our bond forever. Over breakfast, she slid an envelope across the table to me. "Take a look at this, Julie," she said, her voice carrying a mix of seriousness and warmth. I opened the envelope, pulling out some official-looking papers. "What's this?" "It's adoption papers, Julie. I want to adopt you. Make things official, so no one can ever make you feel unwanted again," she explained, watching me closely for my reaction. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Really, Grandma? You mean it?" "Yes, I do. You're not just staying here, Julie. You're my family, and it's time we made that clear to everyone else too." A few weeks later, it was done. We went to court, and I officially became Julie Bennett, with a new sense of belonging that I had longed for since Mom sent me away. With Grandma's support, I started looking towards the future. She encouraged me to focus on my studies, particularly science, which had always fascinated me. "You've got a sharp mind for it, Julie. You could go into medicine. How would you like that?" she suggested one day as we were going over some of my school projects. "I'd love that, Grandma. I want to help people," I replied, the idea taking root. "Then it's settled. We'll get you into a good college program. I'll support you every step of the way," she declared, her determination clear. True to her word, Grandma was there for me throughout my high school years. She tutored me in math and science, using her old-school methods that were strict but effective. "You need to understand the basics, Julie. Can't skip the foundation," she'd insist whenever I struggled with complex problems. I graduated with top marks, thanks to her unwavering support. Grandma then helped me navigate the daunting college applications process. When I got accepted into a medical college with a partial scholarship, she was as proud as if she'd received the acceptance herself. "We'll manage the finances. Don't you worry about that," Grandma said when I fretted over the costs. "You focus on your studies. Become the best doctor you can be." Medical school was tough, but fulfilling. I was drawn to oncology, the branch of medicine that dealt with cancer. It was hard, emotionally and intellectually, but it felt right, like I was exactly where I needed to be. I completed my degree, then my internship, and finally, my residency, each step a milestone that Grandma celebrated. "You're making a real difference, Julie. I'm so proud of you," she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. By the time I turned 32, I was fully established in my career as an oncologist. My life was busy but fulfilling, filled with long hours at the hospital and the satisfaction of knowing I was making a difference. Through it all, Grandma was my anchor, always there to listen and offer advice on tough days. But life, as it often does, threw another curveball my way. Grandma's health, which had been declining, took a turn for the worse. It was swift and unexpected, the kind of decline that leaves you scrambling to catch your breath. I remember coming home one evening, tired after a particularly tough day at the hospital. Grandma was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking out the window. Her voice was weaker when she called me over. "Julie, come sit with me for a bit," she said, patting the chair next to her. I sat down, taking her hand in mine. It felt fragile, like a dried leaf that might crumble under too much pressure. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," she started, her tone serious. "The doctors, they say it's not much time now, We need to talk about things, practical things. The lump in my throat grew, my eyes stung with tears. Grandma, please. She squeezed my hand, her grip still strong. No tears now, Julie. We've got things to sort out. You need to be ready. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's visits, late nights, and legal paperwork. Grandma wanted to ensure everything was in order for me, that there would be no complications with her estate or her wishes. When the end came, it was peaceful. Grandma passed away in her sleep, at home, just as she'd wanted. The emptiness her passing left was palpable, a silence in the house that was too heavy to bear at times. Planning the funeral was hard. I went through her address book, calling relatives and friends. The responses were polite, some even warm, but it became clear that not many would make the effort to come. My heart ached, not just for the loss of Grandma, but for the loneliness of this farewell. The funeral day was quiet, the chapel more empty than not. I stood there, feeling oddly detached as the priest spoke about life, loss, and legacy. It didn't take long after the funeral when the past I thought I'd left behind came knocking at my door. My mother, stepfather, and their daughter, who was now 20 years old, showed up unexpectedly. My mother didn't waste any time. Julie, you need to share the inheritance your grandmother left you, she demanded, her tone entitled. I stared at them, disbelief mixing with anger. You left me, remember? 20 years ago, you decided I was too much of a burden. My mother's face twisted into a sneer. Ungrateful girl. Now you're a rich doctor with an inheritance. You owe us. I laughed, the sound bitter. Grandma adopted me. Legally, you're nothing to me now. The shock on her face was almost comical. My stepfather, ever the bully, leaned in. You're going to regret this, Julie. As they left, I slammed the door behind them, the click of the lock sounding unusually satisfying. Standing there, my back against the door, I felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. A few days after their first visit, I was at work when I got a call from a neighbor. Julie, it looks like your family's at your house again. They've been bringing in furniture, looks like they're moving in or something. When I pulled into the driveway, the sight of their car parked out front made my stomach churn. I walked in to find my mother, stepfather, and stepsister unpacking boxes in the living room, acting as if they owned the place. What are you doing? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother turned around, feigning surprise. Oh, Julie. We're just settling in. After all, this is family property. No, it's not. This is my house, legally left to me by Grandma. You need to leave. Now. My stepfather stepped forward, a smirk on his face. Make us. We're family, and we deserve a part of this house. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me. You haven't been family for over 20 years. You can't just come here and claim what's mine. My stepsister, watching from the side, finally piped up. Come on, Julie, don't be so heartless. We're just asking for what's fair. Fair? I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. What's fair about abandoning a child? What's fair about only showing up when you think there's money to be had? They had no answers, just scowls and muttered curses. I'm calling the police, I declared, pulling out my phone. My mother tried to stop me. You'll regret this, Julie. I've regretted knowing you for years. This is nothing new. I shot back as I dialed 911. The police arrived quickly. I explained the situation, showing them the legal documents proving my ownership of the house and Grandma's will. The officers were firm. You need to leave, one of them told my mother and stepfather. This property doesn't belong to you, and if you don't comply, you'll be removed forcibly. My stepfather glared at me, his anger clear, but there was nothing he could do. This isn't over, Julie, he threatened as they gathered their things. Oh, but it is, I replied, my tone cold and final. After they were gone, I walked through the house, through Grandma's house. Each room was filled with memories, each corner a testament to her love and the life she had built here, a life she had fought to pass on to me. Standing in her favorite spot by the window, I made a promise, not just to her, but to myself. I would not let the bitterness of the past tarnish my future. I had fought hard to become who I was, and I would continue to fight, to honor her legacy and the sacrifices she had made for me.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.